Some people spend an entire lifetime wondering if they made a difference in the world, but the Marines don't have that problem. Freedom is not free, but the U.S. Marine Corps will pay most of your share. There are only two kinds of people that understand Marines: Marines and the enemy. Everyone else has a second-hand opinion. Marines I see as two breeds, Rottweilers or Dobermans, because Marines come in two varieties, big and mean, or skinny and mean. They're aggressive on the attack and tenacious on defense. They've got really short hair, and they always go for the throat. The American Marines have it and benefit from it. They are tough, cocky, sure of themselves and their buddies. They can fight, and they know it.
Hi, you are watching Tractor Talk with Gary. With me today I have a friend of mine. This is Dan. Dan and I worked together for some time, and Dan and I have both been in the Marines. And Dan's got some interesting perspectives from his time in the Marine Corps, and I thought I'd ask him some questions about it. So Dan, why did you join the Marines?
I would say initially the main thing for me was I don't like bullies.
Yeah?
And, you know, a lot of people will say that the Iraq conflict had dubious reasons for being initiated, but Saddam and his family, that regime, they were bullies. So
They were brutal, weren't they?
yeah, didn't do a lot of nice things to his people. So that was one of those things that initially drove me. And then I had a lot of friends and family that were absolutely terrified. They were convinced that there was going to be a draft, and you know they were going to get called up. And I'm like, well, if enough people volunteer to go, there won't need to be a draft. So that was kind of the two main things that drove me to enlist.
Mm-hmm. Why the Marines?
Well, I had a lot of family that were either Navy or Army and these other branches, and my grandfather, being the kind person he was when I was young, was always telling me how, you know, oh, you don't have what it takes to make it in the Army, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I'll show him.
Sounds like a challenge.
I'll go join the Marines. And I grew up, I had an uncle who was a corpsman. He went Greenside. And,
God bless the corpsman.
Absolutely. And I grew up with stories of him talking about the Marines in Somalia in the early 90s. So that was one of the main, another thing is like, you know, kind of, I think when I was young, planted that idea in my head of the Marines and the idea of what they were like in reality as opposed to what you see in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when did you enlist?
2007.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd been out quite a while by that time.
Just a minute.
Yep. But you know what? You know what they say, right? Once a Marine,
Always a Marine.
always a Marine.
And you know, and people are like, well, how is that possible? Well, no, it means more the mindset. It's more that mindset and that lifestyle that it instills in you. It's going to be with you. It's going to change you. It's going to be with you the rest of your life.
And there's something that just that mystique, if you will, about being a Marine, that it's just any branch of military. God bless anybody that serves. Yes. I got a special place in my heart for them. But there is just one notch above when you mention Marines. When I would come home on leave, people would see the haircut, and like I would go to a bar or something, and they would see my haircut, and obviously I'm military. They ask me, you know, the obvious question, you in the military? Yeah. What branch? Marines.
Oh.
Buy this man a beer.
Yep.
You know, without fail.
I mean, there's a reason the Marine Corps, out of all the branches, we are probably one of the only that in basic training, one of the only, I should say, that has whole classes dedicated to our history.
Yep.
Because, well, it's pretty interesting. We take a lot of pride in it. And we have the best uniforms.
Absolutely. So, when did you get out?
2011, very into 2011. I ended up extending. I ended up doing 4.5 years. So I did a little more than my 4 years.
Okay. So you got hurt, didn't you?
Yeah, I got a little. I managed to dodge any kind of really severe, you know, you're going to get dinged up, especially on a combat tour, but even if a not combat tour, you know, just being on ship, you're going to hit your head on things. But yeah, I managed to avoid really anything serious until my third deployment.
Skin your knees, hangnails.
Yeah, you know, like I said, but you know, you were on the Dubuque. They're not built for people that are over, you know, about 5'8". You will hit your head many times. You'll fall on those crazy ladder wells where the stairs are, well, they're like ladders.
Yeah.
You're going to fall and bang your knees on those and have a few scars from those things. Just existing.
So, what all did you do while you were in the Marines? Where all did you go? What did you see?
I did Iraq as a first tour. After Iraq, went and did the 15th Mule, which was where I was on the Dubuque. Interesting. Got to go all over the world and meet all sorts of interesting people. After that, I went and got back and was getting ready to get out, or getting ready to be fapped out from the battalion, and they asked for volunteers, said, hey, who wants to go to Afghanistan for 90 days? And I said, you know what? I haven't been to Afghanistan yet. Yeah, I know. It was the cardinal sin. I volunteered for something.
You know what U.S. Navy stands for, correct? Since the Marines are a department of the Navy. U.S. Navy, because everything in military is acronyms, U.S. Navy stands for you should never again volunteer yourself.
That makes sense. But I did, and then I ended up extending when I was out there, and it went from 90 days to significantly more than that. So, but it was, you know, I was there, they, you know, pulled people for as combat replacements, and they were really short staffed, so I ended up staying out there for a minute.
Of the two, Iraq and Afghanistan, which was the more dangerous?
It's almost apples to oranges.
Okay.
Very, very different environments. Iraq was, we were in Fallujah. It was a very urban-centric environment. More homogenous culturally.
Okay.
You do have, you know, your Sunnis and Shiites. You do have that gulf, but typically very homogenous when it comes to the culture. They're all very similar. Afghanistan's a crazy place. You can be in one area and you have Persians, you have people from Iran, you know, and you go into another area, you have Mongolians. You go into some areas and you can see where half of a village is descendants of Russians.
Everyone that I've talked to about Afghanistan pretty much tells me the same thing. They don't have a national flag. They're just a bunch of tribes. There's no country on the earth like it.
It's exactly. And that also, I mean, most of those people just want to be left alone. And that's kind of why no one's really ever been able to conquer Afghanistan either. Because it's not like you can just take this capital and now you they have our capital, they control our country. No, it's
you have to take every one of them.
You would basically have to kill everyone in the country in order to conquer Afghanistan.
And the terrain there, a lot different than Iraq.
Oh yeah. Well, you can in the same day be down in the salt flats just baking, 120 degrees, just roasting. And then you go just a few miles, you're up in the mountains, you're up in Sangin Valley, you get up in the mountains and you'll go from it's 70 degrees, 80 degrees, 90 degrees during the day. As soon as the sun goes down, now you're dipping down towards zero and you just freeze. And you have a lot of guys out there. I mean, you'll see stories like this, guys that, you know, they get sweaty, hiking with all that gear during the day. Temperature suddenly drops and now they're freezing. You got a bunch of guys that'll hype out from that stuff. So pretty wild.
I had a friend, we used to go to church with him. He was in the Guard and he was stationed in Afghanistan at the time, and we were leaving for church one morning, and he was Facebook messaging me on Facebook, and he was telling me, you know, it's beautiful here today. It's absolutely gorgeous, but he said the mountains are full of Taliban.
Oh yeah,
it's pretty deceptive.
Yeah, and we had a few branches out there that like to build their FOBs and their OPs and stuff down inside of valleys, which I've never understood, especially
just for the benefit of civilians watching this. FOBs, forward operating base.
OPs are observation posts. OPs are typically just put places, so you'll have a central FOB, and typically you'll have OPs that are spread out around it to keep an eye on certain areas. Typically, if you're going to build a FOB down inside of a valley with big mountains around you, you would put OPs on top of the mountains to prevent bad guys from being on the mountains shooting at your FOB. But the Army had a tendency to not do that for some reason. They would just leave the mountains
job security.
Open. Yeah, I guess. I don't know if that's job security when you can have snipers shooting into your FOB, so all your barriers don't really do a whole lot. But not saying that all of them are like that. We got to give the Army a little crap, though.
when I was in, we did a combat exercise for the Army at Fort Hunter Liggett, California.
Oh,
we
boy.
went up and we were to be the aggressors going
Okay.
against them. We went against the regular Army and it was a joke. They weren't motivated. They didn't want to be there. That was pretty obvious. Then we went up against the Army Rangers.
Yes.
I was total different ball game there.
Oh,
Those guys, those are some war fighters there.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
they're. I would say because we worked pretty closely. The Army had AOs abutting ours, and the Rangers. Man, if we got to work with those guys, that was kind of a treat. It was like working with Marines. Is what
On AO?
what I said. Area of operation. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
And they had, I think the Army also calls them ARs, air responsibility or something like that. But AO, same difference.
Yeah. Okay. So, in your travels, what's the most interesting story that you can share with us?
We talked about this a little bit before we started. The local food over there, sanitation standards are a lot different, and even if they're clean, you end up with some different bacteria. Not everyone reacts well to it. Not their bodies just don't deal with it. And we would tell our young Marines, hey, if you've never had this kind of food, don't do it when we're going to be out and about. Your body may not react well to it. Most would listen. They would hear, oh, hey, Senior Marine said, hey,
There's always one.
Don't do that. Well,
it was me when I was in.
we go there to stop, and they go in to talk to this sheik, and there he's getting information, Lieutenant, and this young Marine that was with us, he goes in there with them, and they'll usually have their chai, and the chai was typically pretty safe. It's boiled water and tea. It's not, and some sugar. It's really difficult to get anything from that, but he had partaken of some kebabs and other food. So we get out, we run back to the big fob, go and get some supplies. We're going to do a long run to a company fob, and then out to some OPs, do some resupplies. And we're driving out, and it was a good hike out there to where we were going. And you get out there, it's the middle of nowhere, these salt flats, and I'm looking at him, and we're in the back of a 6x MRAP, which is a big armored truck. 3 axles, lots of room in the back. There's only 3 of us back there, so we're all kind of spread out. I'm looking at this guy, and he's sweating, and he's starting to do the hunch. He's leaning forward, and he's crawling, and I'm like looking like,
oh,
hey, you all right? He's, I don't know, Corpus. I ain't feeling too good. And I'm like, you ate the food, didn't you? Well, it looked all right. I'm like, well, what do we tell you? Even if it's perfectly clean, it could be the most sanitary thing in the world. It's going to have bacteria in it that your body's just not used to. Oh, I didn't think you would. I only had a little. It's like, well, apparently that was enough. Well, it's getting progressively worse. He's just pouring sweat. His face is red. He's starting to get the shakes. I'm like, oh, man. He's like, you think they would stop the truck so I can go? And I'm like, no, they're not going to stop the convoy. And he's like, oh, all right. And he starts looking around, and I'm like, oh, God, what's he doing? And he reaches under his seat, and he's grabbing stuff, and he's doing, what is he doing? He grabs an MRE bag from a used MRE, and it's cut open. Dumps the trash out, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, they're not going to stop. I'm like, oh, no, you're not doing that.
No.
Well, he's like, well, I got to go. He's like, I can't hold it. And I'm like, I got an idea. Well, the back of the MRAP, the doors are kind of like an ambulance door. There's like these 2 doors that close against each other. So we kick them open, myself and the other Marine that was back there with us. We're bracing the doors. We grab his flak. He drops trowel, leans out the back of the truck, and he unleashes this hellacious, demonic scourge. And that would have been okay if we were the rear vehicle, but we weren't the rearmost vehicle.
Of course not.
There was a Humvee behind us, and the vehicle in the back of the convoy, the gunner's facing backwards. Well, the driver can see us. He looks horrified.
I've never seen anything like this.
The vehicle commander, the guy in the passenger seat in the front of the vehicle, he's looking at us, goes,
oh.
Well, the poor guy up in the turret of the Humvee, a lot of the trucks, they had like a little canopy to kind of protect you from the sun, and so snipers couldn't see you. That one had been broken, so they had pulled it off a couple days prior and had been replaced. So he's just getting misted, has no idea. We can see him kind of wiping at his neck, has no idea what's going on. We finally get to our first stop, and we go in our patch roll looking for baby wipes or whatever. Hey man, you should clean yourself. I was like, what? And he's kind of looking at it. He's like, is this oil? We're like, no. Well, of course, he takes a sniff and like,
oh God!
Like, trust us. you don't want to know.
Oh.
So yeah, that's when a lot of people ask me, what's your most memorable thing? It's one of the first things that come to mind that I can tell the most people in flight coming. That's where at like dinner or something. Some people